Welcome to Futures Hub, the podcast that ignites curiosity and navigates the pathways to tomorrow. I'm Mia, your guide on this journey into the future, where we explore the art of foresight, community co-creation, and personal growth. In each episode, we dive deep into innovative techniques to unlock the potential to shape our individual capacities and contribute to vibrant communities. Whether you're a seasoned futurist or just dipping your toes into the world of foresight, let's embark on this journey together. Welcome to Futures Hub. Welcome back to the Futures Hub podcast. In today's episode, I sit down with Disha Arora, founder of the Faith Futures Collective, a voluntary initiative working to center women's voices in faith and gender justice across South Asia. Disha independently shot and directed India's first national-level award-winning documentary to highlight the influence of religion on women's rights, Women and Religion in India. This groundbreaking film went on to receive awards at multiple international film festivals. With an extensive career spanning over a decade in the Indian and international social development sector, Disha has been at the forefront of spearheading international campaigns with numerous prestigious fellowships to her credit. In our conversation, Disha shares how her early experiences witnessing women carry the weight of religious traditions at home, but rarely holding positions of authority, shaped her path into narrative change and futures work. She talks about the power of storytelling, the risks women face when challenging dominant religious structures, and why futures thinking offers a vital way to imagine new possibilities beyond binary interpretations of faith. From her documentary on women and religion in India to the creation of Faith Futures Collective, Disha reflects on the obstacles and opportunities in reshaping centuries-old systems. We also dive into the importance of safety and creativity in amplifying women's stories, the symbolism of what one act of change or bravery might mean across a dominant culture or narrative, and the practice of active hope as a way of moving forward despite uncertainty. Today's conversation is a powerful one about narrative and collective imagination, or reimagination, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Let's dive in. Hello, Disha, and welcome to the Futures Hub podcast. We are so happy to have you here with us today.
Hi, Mia. Thank you so much for having me. I am excited for this conversation.
With such an impressive bio, there's so much ground to cover. I'm sure there's so many insights that you have to share. But first and foremost, what personal or professional moment sparked your journey into founding the Faith Futures Collective?
For me personally, what I saw while growing up is that women were the ones who were carrying or responsible for faith or religious traditions in the households. At the home level, I saw it within my own house, I saw it with my own family, in communities that I grew up in. But we didn't see women as the decision makers when it comes to religious authority or talking about rituals or interpretation of religions or the priests that we see around us. That was a gap that I saw extremely strongly while growing up, and it stayed with me. When I grew up and I started works for nonprofit, as a communications professional, I realized the power and influence that stories and narratives hold in our lives and how important it is to see who is getting to tell the stories. Those were the realizations I had along the way during the work I got to do with grassroots organizations in India, with gender organizations, and that motivated me to shoot an independent documentary titled Women and Religion in India. It was a national level documentary, and it looked at how different religions in India influenced women's rights. And when I say women's rights, I mean constitutional rights. I wanted to show the influence of different religions. India is a highly diverse country. We have 5 major religions of the world. Religions have a huge influence on the day-to-day lifestyle of women and the fabric of community. My documentary covered around 14 states in India. I spoke with around 200 young women and girls to see how religion affects their lived experiences. What are their views on religion? Do they find religious interpretation or certain religious traditions gender biased? And how does it also affect the policy level when it all comes from lived experiences of our decision makers, of our politicians, of our judiciary? The documentary was able to spark a lot of conversation. When I would screen the documentary, I would get feedback from a lot of women that we see these kind of practices and they are highly discriminatory. And I watched this documentary and it made me reflect on a personal level what these small traditions mean in the bigger picture. At the same time, I realized that one documentary is just one part of the story, one part of the change that the system needs. Hence, I decided to find Faith Futures Collective. What we are trying to do at Faith Futures Collective is center women's voices, to look at religious practices with progressive lens, with feminist lens, and look at it from a values point of view. Most of the religious texts that we have across the world is being interpreted by men for men. And there is certain things written in religious books across all religions which are discriminatory against women, which are discriminatory against LGBTQI people. There is a lot of problem that happens at the interpretation level. And it becomes a huge problem when you apply something which was written 1400 years ago, 2000 years ago in current scenario. What we are trying to do at Faith Futures Collective is create an ecosystem of narrative change where faith is interpreted by women with progressive values, with feminist values, and create long-term shift in conversations when women talk about faith and influence of faith in their lives.
I wonder if you can speak a bit more about how you chose to include that futures lens. You have definitely that strong anchor into faith and that collective. However, your collective itself is named Faith Futures Collective. What is the significance of including futures within that work and within that collective?
We realized faith is a lot about what is written. It is a lot about what is documented and what is tradition and what has been happening for centuries. The vision of Faith Futures Collective is to look at the written versus the lived experiences of women. That's where the futures part come in, because foresight methodology and the futures method allows us to imagine different futures which are possible and then act towards them. The problem with the way faith is interpreted is it's either this or that. There is no in between. There are no possibilities largely. Futures and foresight as a methodology allows us to create different reality and different ways we could approach the same thing. Instead of talking about one singular future, it's not just one possibility or one interpretation that we see happening in the future. That's how the futures part of Faith Futures Collective came in. We want to ensure that women across different castes, different classes, different faiths and regions co-create the futures which we want to build, rather than just featuring women as subjects, not just featuring them, but talking about how we imagine the future to be. For us, one big thing is lived experience first. That's an important value. Yes, we have oral histories, we have written histories, we have a lot of things that are documented. Along with that, we need to also highlight the lived experiences of women when it comes to influence of faith and religious practices in their lives.
You've mentioned a few of the different dominant narratives that you're hoping to challenge through this work. But what have been some of the most dominant or persistent obstacles as you've gone through this? I imagine when you're working with something so significant and close to home to many as religion and faith, there are probably several obstacles, but has there been some that have been particularly cropping up while you have undertaken this work?
From an obstacle point of view, it is very similar across different religions. One is the holding of power. It's largely men who hold power in religious institutions and religious decision making. And they are also far removed from the lived realities of the ground. There is a huge gatekeeping problem which is happening at the institutional level. Safety is a huge risk for women who speak up. Historically, we have seen across regions that safety is a huge risk when people, especially women, talk about certain religious practices. We try to push progressive values. Faith exists for women to also find themselves, their own self actualization. Then there is some tokenism that happens at the religious institution level. So they feature one woman and say, okay, we are opening doors to all genders, all women, just by doing one token gesture. Those are couple of obstacles we are seeing all across. The authority and decision making power is with men, even if there are women priests and women in the institutional level. During my documentary, I learned in Jainism that if there is a man priest and a woman priest present, a woman priest would first have to say namaste to the male priest, showing that reverence for the male priest. It will not happen the other way around. So even if the barriers are being broken, it is still nowhere close to where it should be when we talk about equality or equity. It's similar obstacles across religions and across regions. And it is similar narratives that need to be challenged across religions and regions. We see that too often the interpretation of religious text shows women in a binary role. Either you are a silent, accepting good woman, or you show even slightest bit of defiance that I don't want to follow this particular tradition, and immediately you are labeled as a bad woman. It's very binary. It exists all across religions, that it's very easy to be a bad woman. You can just show a little bit of defiance and then you become a bad woman. This binary is a hugely problematic narrative because it boxes women. We want to center women as thinkers, as leaders, as creators of their own lives and of their own lived experiences. It's the same narrative which we want to challenge across religion. It is sexual and reproductive health, like religion being used as a tool to tell what women should do with their bodies, or menstruation stigma, which is a huge problem in India and South Asia. A menstrual taboo exists across religions. It's used as a tool in different ways to control women in different areas of life.
You've alluded to the fact that this spans religions, and there are the five major religions in India that your documentary had covered, as well as several others. When you undertake the Fifth Features Collective work, have you had to navigate complexity across religious identities, across languages, across borders, or do you find that with the mission to amplify and further embrace women's voices, you're able to cross barriers that may traditionally arise?
Our work at Faith Futures Collective is focused on South Asia because it's same religions which are being practiced in that part of the world and similar traditions, similar languages. So it made sense for us to look at this particular region and not diversify it too much. But within that region, it is highly diverse. It's multiple religions, multiple languages. But our work is rooted in the values of respect and social justice. We understand that faith is very important for several women because they find their identity, they find their community using faith. There's a lot of self actualization that can happen through faith and spirituality. We respect different practices and different belief systems that women from different religions come with. At the same time, acknowledging that religion is used as a stick to control women, that is also a reality. These two binaries are existing, and a lot is in between. A lot of women choose to follow certain practices and choose not to follow certain religious practices. So, for Faith Features Collective, one huge value is respect, that there are different perspectives. A lot of the value that I'm talking about come from feminist value system because that has influenced me a lot in my life as well. We are talking about social justice and creating systems rooted in justice and equity. That really helps define and shape our work. Obviously, the practical part of language and region and those barriers definitely exist. Right now, we are a very small team. I have two passionate, amazing young people working with me. So it's just the three of us. And we try to do as much as possible. Right now, from a language point of view, most of the content is only available in English. But we are trying to also include Hindi and integrating a little bit of AI and taking its help in the process. Because we are a self-funded voluntary group, there is not much we are able to do right now, but it is something which is extremely important for us because without language and without context, the reach would be highly limited.
You are a small but mighty team for sure, doing such important work around amplifying women's voices and giving women that sense of empowerment in religious spaces. You're undertaking a paradigm shift. I imagine it can be challenging for some of the women that you may encounter to counter what they have been subjected to or have experienced sometimes their whole lives. From a Faith Futures Collective perspective, as you amplify these voices, as you capture these stories, how do you ensure that sense of safety for the women that are coming forward and joining in this cause? Is there a process that you undertake, or are there methods that you have to support these women? Has that been a need expressed in past? How does that look?
safety and well-being of the women whom we are highlighting in the stories. It's very important that they feel safe and that their well-being is taken care of. Right now, the stories that we have put out so far are not extremely quote unquote scandalous or highly challenging that would put the safety of the contributors and women at risk. We are trying to be transparent. The women peace builders we are interviewing are happy for their interviews to be published and promoted. So we are doing okay from a safety point of view. Having said that, if there is something that a particular contributor or a particular peace builder is not comfortable talking about, we don't push them. We don't force them to talk about it or change name. I remember talking to the excellent peace builder in South Asia and doing really impactful work. And one of the conversations she had with a young woman in Kashmir, which is a contested region between India and Pakistan. She was unsure to talk about that young woman. So we did a creative brainstorming exercise. Can we do it like a fiction, where we change the location and not mention the name of the place and things like that? So we try to find creative ways because we would rather are on the side of safety, taking minimal or less risk. Because we are talking about narrative change and storytelling, it allows us to use creativity. We try to be creative when we are telling such stories. We are also right now in the process of designing research for documenting lived experiences of women across South Asia. Here also, we will not reveal the identities of respondents. We will try and keep it as anonymous, as general as possible. A lot of credit goes to the feminist movements in South Asia. For decades, they have been talking about and pushing the envelope on several of these conversations. The same conversations being done 20 years ago would be highly problematic, but they have made these conversations mainstream, and the feminist movements, grassroots activists, Dalit activists have been doing incredible work, which allows people like us at Faith Futures Collective to continue having these conversations without being too worried about risk and safety.
That's so important. That nod to the shoulders of giants that we stand upon, the power of words and narrative to be able to shift the futures that we exist in, evidenced even just by the fact that we can do this work because of the work of those who have come before us. I think even the beauty in the work that you're doing around narrative power and highlighting lived experience speak so much to the impact and influence that, whether it's the written word or the spoken word, the word can have. I love that example that you shared earlier of how you've been creatively protecting the women that you've been working with. I was wondering if you could share another story or example to contextualize a time when a story that you documented created tangible ripple effects, whether it's in the community or in the policy space. What does it look like when word comes into action?
Thank you, Mia, for that question. I just want to give a caveat that what we are trying to do here with Faith Futures Collective is change centuries old system which hold huge power and huge influence, and one documentary and one small collective. I don't know how much of a quote unquote tangible change or impact we could have. Having said that, for narrative change to happen, it takes an ecosystem. And I am extremely proud of the fact that Faith Futures Collective is a part of that ecosystem. And we are trying to contribute and continue the conversations on progressive interpretation of religions and supporting women when it comes to how do they want to live their faith or whether they want to live with their faith or not. So allowing for all those possibilities. I'm extremely proud of that fact. Coming to your question about a story where narrative change or grassroots feminist work has helped create policy change, I want to give the example of this temple, Sabarimala temple, which is in southern part of India. This temple doesn't allow women of reproductive age to enter the temple. Obviously, as per the Constitution of India, it cannot be allowed because public spaces could not be discriminatory against men or women. So there's a lot of activists, academicians in southern India and other parts of India who have been challenging this ban, and they have done movements, they have taken the policy route, they have legally challenged this particular discriminatory practice. When I did my documentary in 2018, I was able to also document and interview some of these activists and show work that they're trying to do, and how, even though it is one temple, it could be symbolic in several ways. It's a temple which has huge popularity in that part of the country. So I even visited the temple until the level where women was allowed. So I went and documented it and made it part of my documentary. In September 2018, Supreme Court ruled that women of all ages may enter Sabarimala. That was a huge victory. It created a very good precedent from a legal point of view, from a policy change point of view for other places. Having said that, in November 2019, there were review petitions that were sent, and the Supreme Court's decision was contested. It is still pending in front of the bench. It's a long battle. There won't be like one high moment which will change the trajectory of how religions influences women. But it's the culmination of these small but extremely important moments. Yeah, so the Sabrimala temple, even though it is still being debated this year, it opens all kinds of conversations. It opens all kinds of discourse. These religious institutions actually function through the money that is channeled in. People donate to the temples and churches and other places. If tomorrow women stop participating economically in the temples, how would that influence a temple like Sabarimala, which is highly revered? It's a really big, influential religious place. So when this whole debate started, it wasn't just about whether women can enter one temple or not. It allowed a whole set of conversations to happen. If this practice is discriminatory, what about practices happening at the local temple level where priests don't let women worship certain deities or don't let women offer certain offerings to certain deities? What about those kind of practices? These important moments takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of academicians, activists, journalists, filmmakers to come together and keep talking about this issue for even the verdict to be passed, which unfortunately was further challenged a year later. But it allows a lot of other kinds of conversations that can happen.
That's significant. And I know you provided that caveat that it's centuries and millennia of religion. It's not like one documentary or one collective could make a change, but a documentary and a collective are required for change to happen. It's important to not make your contributions smaller than they are. It's significant because it takes everybody coming together. Even the name of your collective alludes to the fact that it takes a collective to make change. So that's a very significant example. Very excited to hear about what happened in 2018. Of course, sad to hear that it was contested, but again, centuries of systems require that long lens, that future's lens. But I think it's the nature of the work that we undertake. Sometimes this work can be very upsetting. There could be progress and then there could be setbacks. It's hard when you're facing systemic injustice, when you're facing oppression and those that are trying to make others feel less than. How do you maintain that sense of hope in the face of conflict or oppression or resistance? What pushes you to continue this work?
Things could be really disappointing if we start looking at them from not just micro level but also a macro lens, seeing what is happening all around us. I feel hope these days is a really difficult business, and it is very hard to find hope. People feeling moments of hopelessness or people feeling moments of what is the meaning of my work and what is the impact of my work, that is completely natural, and it shows that what we are working towards, systems change, it is a really difficult work that we are trying to undertake. Feeling disheartened or feeling that our work is not creating the impact that we want to create, it's completely natural. Having said that, I'm a strong believer of finding hope in different situations. And that led me to conversations with young people on radical hope and active hope. I was recently reading about the concept of active hope, which is by Joanna Macy and Chris Johnstone. And I would recommend that to anybody who is feeling a little bit of hopelessness, which is completely understandable given how things are. In the concept of active hope, they put it very beautifully that hope is a practice. It is moving forward with the belief that I don't know what the future is going to be. And still, I will take the next step, not alone, but I will invite others in to be part of that next step. I read that concept and I would recommend people to go deeper into it because it talks about a lot of the realities we are living through these days. They say that generally we live in three stories. One is the great unraveling, which Mia, you also spoke about. The way the world is operating right now, we see so many systems, either oppressive systems continuing or good systems being undone. So we are seeing that all around us, and that unraveling is happening. The second story they talk about is business as usual. While the great unraveling is happening, there is also regular day to day business. You and I are recording this podcast, we'll reply to emails, and then we are going for dinners and things like that, right? So we could be reading really horrible news in the morning and worried about it or worried about climate change or other things. But in the afternoon, we are attending a meeting. So it's those two realities. We are holding them at the same time. I feel it is very important to understand these stories. And the third story, which they talk about, which is very important, is the great turning. That while the great unraveling is happening, there are things rooted in social justice, things rooted in systems change, things rooted in foresight methodology, where we are trying to imagine a future and build futures which are just and equitable for people in the world, which are not discriminatory on gender, caste, sexuality, region, language, and other things. The whole concept of active hope is something which helped me verbalize a lot of the emotions that I was feeling, that we are holding different realities at the same time in our heads. And it is okay to feel hopelessness. And it is okay to feel that I don't know what is the impact of my work. In those moments, I try to channel the concept of active hope that, yeah, I don't know what the future is going to be, but let me move forward and invite others in.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I got shivers listening to it. I'll add that book to the show notes. So if any folks want to read more, they can see it there. I think it really speaks to the nature of those working in systems change, the nature of those working in futures and foresight to practice active hope, because not having a future would feel hopeless. So having to navigate this space in and of itself is an act of hope, an act of resistance. I just think it's so important how you've contextualized the way that as we live in this increasingly complex world, it's possible to hold so many contradictions, so many different stories all at once, and yet still try to actively hope and move towards a future that we might not know what it looks like, but it's there. There's something that right? When you think of that future, even though the future may seem uncertain or unclear at times, when you think of your future, the future of Faith Futures Collective, what do you hope it would look like?
For us, it is very important that we live up to the collective part of our name, that we are able to get different points of view. When I made that documentary, I interviewed several people from different parts of the world, different backgrounds, but still it was my lens with which I put the documentary out there. It is very important that we have diverse perspectives and we have diverse possibilities involved. So that is an important part of our work, that we don't just tell stories, we also enable other storytellers, because as I said in the beginning, who gets to tell the story is a very important part of narrative change. So we create space where we have other storytellers, young women from different backgrounds, different castes, different religions, coming forward and telling and interpreting their lived experiences and stories. So that would be an important part of the work that we do going forward. Building a collective, finding more voices, finding more lenses to look at other people, interpreting and telling the story in their own way. That would be an important part of the future of Faith Futures Collective.
Beautiful. From that perspective, I was wondering if there were any calls to action that you would like to share with listeners. If there's anything in particular that you would like listeners to get involved with, if there's one thing you'd like them to take away from this conversation, what would you like to share? What would you like them to share or do?
One call to action that I can share with your listeners is we are always looking for people's opinions and people's perspectives and people's experiences. If there is something that they want to share, we are happy to do a virtual coffee with them. Just write an email to us. We also have an ideation playground where if you have an idea and you want to see how to build it, like do you want to do an article, do you want to do a video, do you want to write a poem about it, we have developed this framework of an ideation playground where we help you think through how you shape it. All lived experiences are welcome. All ideas are welcome. As I started in the beginning, it's a voluntary initiative and we want different voices. Hit us up. We would love to hear from you.
I love the term ideation playground. It sounds so fun. I will also link that in the show notes, how to access the ideation playground, how to find out more. There's so much good work that you're undertaking here. I'm so appreciative of the time that you have been able to spend with us. I can't wait to see where it goes next. I think even just having this conversation speaks to the benefit of people coming together and being able to connect.
Thank you so much, Mia. I really appreciate you creating this space for us to have this conversation. I think it is so important to take the future's mindset and take the future's methodology and apply it to different systems change work that is happening globally. This is a wonderful platform that you are trying to create.
Thank you so much. And there you have it, folks. That was Disha Arora, founder of the Faith Futures Collective. A few things that particularly resonated for me during this conversation was the reminder that change takes an entire ecosystem. It takes so many different players and partners, and at times the scope of change can be very humbling. Not to mention the thought of what can one individual or one group do to change sometimes centuries of oppression or systemic injustice. However, that scope does not make the work that we can do any less important. If ever, it is more important than ever to participate in that change, to participate in that ecosystems that change can happen. Another takeaway for me was the fact that narrative power, who gets to tell the story, truly shapes not just our past and present, but the futures we can build. And while storytelling is sometimes seen as something that isn't as significant as policy, for example, storytelling holds so much significance. Stories and who gets to tell those stories helps center who is in power or whose voices are heard. Finally, one final insight that I truly hope listeners take from this conversation is Disha's invitation to practice active hope. Moving forward into the unknown, not alone, but alongside others. Disha's call to action is simple yet profound. Share your story. Whether you're sharing your story as a poem or an article or as a conversation between friends, share it. The Faith Futures Collective has created what Disha calls an ideation playground, a space where lived experiences and ideas can seed new futures. And whether you're participating in Faith Futures Collective's ideation playground or you're creating an ideation playground of your own amongst friends, it's important to go out there and play. If you want to learn more about Faith Futures Collective or connect with Disha, you can find links to the collective and explore their work in the show notes. And if the episode resonated with you, please share it with your network, because the more voices we invite in, the stronger this work becomes. Thank you for listening to the Futures Hub podcast. Tag us on Instagram or LinkedIn, share your thoughts, and let's keep the discussion going about how we can shape better futures together. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Futures Hub so you never miss an episode. We have more incredible guests coming your way, diving deep into the intersections of foresight, community, and co-creation. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep imagining, keep co-creating, and keep working towards those better futures for all.